My name is Robert Peachey,
And your birth date?
July 8th, 1925. I was in the Army Air Corps in World War II. I was a staff sergeant. Flew out of two places. One was Darwin, Australia, and the other was Mindoro Island in the Philippines. I went into service within a year after I finished high school.
You were drafted or
No.
enlisted?
I enlisted in the, what they call the Air Cadet program,
Why did you pick that?
because I didn't want to be in the Army or the Navy.
Process of elimination. Huh?
Yeah, the Air Cadet program, you ended up being a commissioned officer, and you could either be a pilot, navigator, or bombardier. I enlisted in the spring of 1943 when I was 17, and I couldn't be drafted until I was 18 in July. I was called to active duty in September of 1943.
And where did you go?
I reported to Camp Grant, Illinois, which was near Rockford. And then we took a 2-day train ride to Miami, Florida. And I went through my basic training in living on Miami Beach in a hotel, which was kind of a unique experience. The Air Corps had taken over all the hotels in Miami Beach except one, and was pretty unique compared to going through basic training at a regular Army base. And we used to march on regular city streets, usually singing. We had to sing no matter where we went. Our drill instructor had gone to both Ohio State and Yale, so the first thing we learned was those two fight songs. In addition, we sang a lot of the popular songs of the day. One of them was Paper Doll, and you wouldn't think of that as being a marching song, but we could march to just about anything.
I'm gonna buy a paper doll.
The only civilian hotel was only a half block from our hotel, and a lot of the movie stars stayed there. It was called the Roney Plaza, and one of them in particular was Joey Brown, the old comedian, who used to come over and talk to us at night. He'd stand and talk to us for 15 or 20 minutes at a time. Really a cool guy.
Did he entertain? Did he tell jokes, or did he just?
Yeah, he was
Yeah.
funny, but for the most part, he would ask us where we were from and talk about personal stuff more than anything. The other thing that was kind of unique there is we took our PT training on the beach about 3 times a week. And on the beach, every time we went there, would be flotsam and jetsam from the sunken ships out in the Atlantic, because the German subs were still sinking a lot of ships right off our shores, something you didn't realize at the time. And we were blacked out. Couldn't have lights on at night. And after the 3 months was up, we were given a test, written test, and it was very tough. You really had to have, particularly in the math section, you really had to have college math to even consider passing it,
Wow.
which most of us hadn't had. A few had college training. And most of us flunked out. And we found out later that that was the purpose of the test, was to flunk out as many as possible, because at the time they had 40,000 in the Air Cadet training program, which was much more than they needed. So they flunked out probably 75 or 80% of us. I was fortunate though. I went from Miami Beach to a gunnery school in Laredo, Texas, aerial gunnery school. Many of the 40,000 that washed out ended up in the infantry, because the Air Corps was actually part of the Army then. There was no separate Air Force.
Must have been disappointing.
Yeah, at first it was. But like I say, when we found out that most of those that washed out ended up in the infantry,
Wow.
we were pretty happy going to aerial gunnery school. Yeah, we went to Laredo, Texas. By then it was mid-December, and when we got to Laredo, which is right on the Mexican border, on the Rio Grande River. So we were immediately given a leave to go home for Christmas. So I got to go home for Christmas.
Oh, wow.
They probably knew that most of us were going to be in combat within a few months, so they gave us a break. We only flew once. We went up in a small two-seater plane, open cockpit, and fired a 30 caliber machine gun at a tow target, which is several hundred feet away. And as we finished firing, the pilot knew, and he would immediately go into a dive. We were in this open cockpit held by a leather strap around our leg, which was the only thing that was holding us in. And then he gave us a rough ride home, the purpose of which was to make us sick. And they did a good job. Most of us ended up landing with our head hanging over the cockpit edge.
Oh my gosh. Had you flown very much before you went into the service?
Never,
Never?
I had never flown. Yeah, there wasn't much flying going on in those days. There was a little commercial aviation, but not too much. I was there for probably 6 weeks, reported back after Christmas. And from there we were assigned to Air Base in Fresno, California. From there I was assigned to a crew, found out we were going to be on B-24 Liberator, 4-engine bombers. I was there about a week. And from there we were assigned to Muroc, California, Air Base. I ended up being the assistant flight engineer. And one of the highlights of my career at Muroc Air Base was that my main job really was to refuel the plane after a mission. One day I was up on top of the plane with the flight engineer refueling the plane, and all of a sudden the flight engineer is looking at the airstrip and he gets a startled look on his face. So I looked to see what he was startled by, and there was a fighter plane about 10 foot above the airstrip going at high speed. He got to the end of the airstrip, turned vertically and went straight up in the air. And that was the first time we had ever seen a jet. This is March 1944.
Wow.
We spent approximately 8 months in Darwin from August of 44 to February 45. Flew 21 combat missions out of Darwin. Most of the time we were flying over small islands in the Dutch East Indies, hitting airstrips and shipping ports. The airstrip at Darwin was called Long Strip. The reason it got that name is it was a huge airstrip, 10,000 feet long. Our B-24s only needed 5,000 feet for landing and takeoff. The reason it was 10,000 feet is originally it was planned to handle B-29s, which were just coming on board at the time, much larger plane. At the same time, we're in the process of taking over the Mariana Islands, which were much closer to Japan. So B-29s ended up flying out of Tinian and Saipan in the Marianas, and they never did fly out of Darwin. We were the only ones that ever flew out of Darwin. We flew our last of our 40 missions on June 5th. And then we spent 2 weeks waiting for orders to go to Manila to pick up our cruise ship on the way home to San Francisco.
You were going to leave the plane there?
Yeah.
To
Mhm.
take-
Would get a flight to Manila from where we were, and we spent probably a week in Manila waiting for the ship to take us to San Francisco. That was on June 5th. We finished on June 18th. While we were still in Mindoro, we were having breakfast one morning, and all of a sudden, a lot of black smoke came up from the airstrip, which indicated there was probably a crash. One of the planes had crashed on takeoff. I found out later that my best friend, outside of the fellows on our crew, was killed in the crash. And it was very ironic because his crew had finished flying. However, he had missed the mission because he was sick one day. So he had to fly his 40th mission. And he ended up flying with another crew. And it just so happened that he was on a crew that crashed on landing or on takeoff, which was probably one of the low lives
That's,
of my combat career.
was he also a gunner?
Yeah, he was a gunner. He and I and another fellow called Jim Edwards used to play catch in the evening when we were in Darwin, primarily in Darwin, if we weren't flying it. We were the only three guys that had brought our baseball gloves along. So that was our main recreation in Darwin. But that was kind of a sad day.
That's very sad. That's a sad story.
Yeah, especially,
The last.
the fact that it was his last mission. We flew to Manila from Mindoro, and that's where we picked up our cruise ship to San Francisco. We left Manila on July 3rd, and we ended up in San Francisco on July 26th. Rather uneventful cruise. The first few days, probably the first week, we were accompanied by destroyer escorts, which kind of told us we were still in a war zone. But after that, it was just, actually it wasn't a very rough voyage either. It was pretty smooth, even though we were crossing the huge Pacific.
Wow.
And we landed in San Francisco on July 26th. Spent about a week there, and we were on a train. We had a 30-day leave to go home. We were on a train going from San Francisco to Chicago when the two atom bombs were dropped.
I was just going to ask you where you were.
Yeah, so the war was over. And
So they announced it on the train.
yeah. Mm-hmm. And after a 30-day leave in Chicago, I was assigned to Randolph Field, to go to Randolph Field for reassignment. Got to Randolph Field and got the good news right away that I had enough points to be discharged. So within 3 weeks, I was discharged.
Wow.
The war was over for me.
Wow.
So that's the end of my story. 2 years of my life that I guess I wouldn't have missed for anything. It's unique experience. I was fortunate enough to go to the University of Notre Dame on a GI Bill.
Oh, wow. Right.
Yeah. I ended up with a degree in mechanical engineering. So that was one of the pluses. Yeah, I got out in October of 1945 and started in the spring at Notre Dame, spring of 46. I went to school during the summer so I could get through as quickly as possible. So I was able to finish in about 3 years, but going to school during the summer, which was pretty easy to do because most of the fellows that were at school in those days were ex-GIs.
Oh,
I got out of college, graduated from Notre Dame in 1949. In 1950, I married Mary Farley, and we were married for 56 years. She passed away in December of 2006. We had 5 kids, 4 daughters, 1 son, 14 grandkids, 2 great-granddaughters. The main job I had was working for a company called Siaki Brothers in Chicago that manufactured automated welding equipment. I worked for them for 35 years. It was a very interesting job. Most of the work we did was for defense purposes and some for automotive plants. Very interesting job. During the 35 years, I had many different positions.
when did you retire?
Actually, I retired in 1992. And I've been enjoying retirement ever since.